Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got 5 must-sit wide receivers for Week 2 fantasy football action. Whether it's the matchup, the expected cornerback coverage, or shadowing that we might see with these players throughout the game, a lingering injury, whatever the case might be, there's something that elevates the risk for each one of these players this week and makes me feel a little bit more uncomfortable with the fantasy floor in these situations and a little bit more shaky about these ceilings that these players might have had in a more favorable matchup or opportunity here in a coming week. So without further ado, let's drop down, give today's video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, turn the bell on, and let's hit that intro and get right in to today's video. Alrighty, I said this in my must-sit running backs episode, but I'll say it again here in the wide receivers video. By the way, if you haven't checked that video already, you should go down and do that just by heading over to my channel. I posted it this morning, so both of these are fresh, new, and ready for you post Thursday Night Football and ready to go for those Sunday and Monday night performances. But I understand that not all of you will have the ability or luxury to keep all these players out of your lineups, because at the end of the day, depth is a real issue in fantasy football. But what I'm here at least to help you do is realize the risks and the reasons why some of these players might have elevated risks in lineups this week and why they might be more prone to not hit those ceilings or not live up to those floor expectations that we have for them. So first on the list here, I've got DJ Chark and Marvin Jones collectively. As weird as this may sound, I'm not a big Laviska Shenault guy, but he actually might be the safest fantasy option for Week 2 against the Denver Broncos, because I think this is a dang tough matchup for this Jags team. I expect Trevor Lawrence to struggle a lot. He threw 3 picks last week against the Houston Texans. This is a much better pass rush, secondary, and just all-around defensive unit. You've got Kyle Fuller on one side, Patrick Surtain on the other, Justin Simmons on the back end, Kareem Jackson's back there, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb rushing the passer. This is a very, very tough matchup. And for a rookie quarterback who is supposed to be a generational talent, and I'm not saying that Trevor Lawrence isn't, I'm not saying that he can't be that. We saw Peyton Manning struggle mightily in his first season in the NFL. But for a player of that caliber, that upside, that potential, he struggled a lot in Week 1 against a Texans team that we all thought was a joke without Deshaun Watson. This Denver Bronco team is for real, or at least their defense is. We're still feeling out that offense, that Teddy Bridgewater-led football team. But I can tell you this, that unit absolutely demolished the Giants Week 1, and I'm not so sure that the Giants offense is all that much better or all that much worse than the Jaguars. I think they're very comparable. They both have terrible offensive lines. They both have talented quarterbacks. Now, Trevor Lawrence, I would say, is a much better prospect. But at the end of the day, there's an arsenal of weapons that both QBs have at their disposal, and I think that DJ Chark, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, James Robinson are all very good assets there. But if their quarterback is under duress and struggling, he can't get them the ball effectively. We saw this with Aaron Rodgers last week. He is the reigning MVP, and because his offensive line couldn't hold up in pass pro, he was getting smoked, had no time to find receivers, and nobody was separating. So you've got tough cornerbacks matching up against these receivers. I think that the separation is going to be smaller than it would have been in any other game. You're also talking about a group that wasn't really on the same page in Week 1. To me, this just looks like a disaster. To me, this looks like a really low floor for any one of these given players. And I think the best case scenario here is going to be quick, short passes to Laviska Shenault and try and let him do some work after the catch. But that's not DJ Chark and Marvin Jones' game. They're more deep passing threats. They make the big plays. That's why I'm staying away from them here in Week 2. Brandon Aiyuk for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, he's still recovering from a hamstring injury. He's not officially ruled out or at risk right now, based off of what we're hearing, to miss this Week 2 performance against the Philadelphia Eagles. But he hung up a goose egg in Week 1. No statistical production from one of my favorite draft picks in fantasy football this year. This kid is wildly talented. His separation numbers and success against man and zone coverage are very, very impressive. And I love what he can do at all 3 levels of the defense. But right now, the situation is just not good, and there is way too much risk to put him back into starting lineups. I actually just went out and traded for him in my Dynasty League. That's probably my favorite league right now, and it's one of my most competitive league formats that I'm in. And I went out and secured him for my team because of how confident I am that he will eventually succeed down the road and get back on track. But that time is not week 2. You don't want to start him in your lineup before you actually see with your own 2 eyes that he is healthy, that he's producing up to standard, and that he is back to what he was as a rookie at the end of the 2020 season. Hamstring injuries can be a bugger. They can really impact your production and your performances. I want to know for a fact that Aiyuk is healthy in himself before I'm rolling him out there and depending on him to put up statistical production for my fantasy team. Brandon Aiyuk also, Kyle Shanahan hasn't exactly been overly optimistic and positive the way he's talked about Brandon Aiyuk over the past couple weeks here. He talked about how he's not in the doghouse, but he also said that that injury has lowered him down the depth chart for the team, and that if he wants to be out there and play every snap, he's going to have to be significantly better than probably a Trent Sherfield, who has basically elevated himself up in the lineup as a result of this Aiyuk injury. But at the end of the day, the message here is to make a long story very short. Don't start Aiyuk. The risk outweighs the reward for now, but do not panic. If you're a Brandon Aiyuk owner, hold. Do not sell him. Do not bite on a trade for dirt cheap. He will get back out there. He will produce, and he will be a productive lineup option at some point this season. Michael Pittman, you're not going to find me anywhere near him this week, this season, whatever the case might be. In week 2, I am staying as far away as possible. Jalen Ramsey, first of all, the top corner arguably in the National Football League, is bound to clamp up everyone but maybe 3 players in the entire league. Michael Pittman had 1 catch for 14 yards in week 1, and he's supposed to be the guy stepping up and breaking out as the Colts' next top option. Jonathan Taylor led this team in passing yards in week 1. They don't have anyone who can catch the football at a consistent rate. Now, Michael Pittman can come out here and have a boom week, but boom, bust all over the map. He hasn't effectively shown us that on a consistent basis he can put up production. He actually had a really nice game against my Packers last year, and that was what was thought to be his breakout game, but he never really materialized after that. We all talked about him this year as probably the most likely player to step up and grasp the number 1 role in this Colts passing offense, but he didn't show us that in week 1 against Seattle when they needed him early on here. And against the Rams, you get the toughest cornerback matchup drawn in the league. I don't think he's going to be shadowed by Jalen Ramsey because I just don't think that the Rams respect him to that level. But someone's going to have to cover him. And at the end of the day, the Rams have multiple good defensive backs, and I also don't expect them to send Jalen Ramsey at Zach Pascal either. So Pittman's the guy I expect to be covered by him. He might completely get shut out this week. We've seen other corners shut out players of more caliber and more status than Pittman in the past. Corey Davis for the New York Jets, another guy I will not be playing. I'm not playing any of my Jets here in week 2. Zach Wilson's going to have a tough day. It's going to be tough sledding. It's going to be a rough afternoon for him. Bill Belichick is an absolute rookie quarterback killer. And think of a Justin Herbert last season. How great he was. The rookie passing records he set. His ability to scramble outside the pocket and make accurate pinpoint throws in his rookie season was literally astounding. And he got completely whooped by Bill Belichick when the Chargers played New England last year. Their down year. They missed the playoffs. Was probably the worst Patriots team in the last 2 decades, arguably. They reloaded, spent a bunch of money on defense. That doesn't necessarily always translate to being a better defensive unit, but they've had new faces in the building here. This is a revamped, reloaded roster. They were very competitive last week, despite the fact they lost the game. Bill's still going to outsmart Zach Wilson here. Zach struggled, started out 2 for 7 passing against the Panthers in week 1. There's a lot of risk here. If Zach can't get the ball to his wide receivers, they can't produce. And if he's throwing interceptions, struggling, and just getting beat up back there, he's probably going to get the you-know-what kicked out of him from the blitz, because they are just going to send heat at Zach Wilson and put helmets in his chest and in his lap all afternoon long. I want to watch this game because I'm interested to see if Zach Wilson can combat the adversity. Something that'll be really telling is if Zach can prove me wrong and come out here and do what almost no rookie quarterback has been able to against Bill Belichick and produce against him and maybe even win the game, then we're talking. Then Zach Wilson here has that ceiling and he has that it factor that we hoped he could heading into the draft. This is getting off topic besides the point. We're outside of the fantasy realm and scope of things here at this point. But basically the message is I expect him to struggle mightily because that's what every other impressive quarterback even in their rookie season has done against Bill in the past here. And then Will Fuller against the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are they're not a shutdown defensive unit, but Tre'Davious White is as close as it gets to a shutdown corner. Last week, the work he did on Chase Claypool was very, very impressive. And the things that I think that he can also do and treat Will Fuller is what my expectation is as the Dolphins' #1 passing option is kind of intimidating for a guy you see finished as wide receiver 28. I have that up on the screen because I think it's relevant. He was facing a suspension in week 1 and wasn't able to play because he was serving the end of that suspension he had imposed upon him while he was still on the Texans for a substance abuse or whatever the case was. It was an illegal substance by the NFL standards. We don't really know what that was. But Will Fuller was putting up wide receiver 1 numbers. He was actually a top 12 wide receiver prior to his suspension and missing the end of last year, but still finished as the wide receiver 28. Coming into week 2, his week 1, with Tua, there's going to be some chemistry that needs to be developed. And while we're on the topic, I think you should also sit DeVante Parker this week, who's also another viable candidate to be guarded by Tre'Davious White for a healthy chunk of this game. Even if he's playing 50-50 of his snaps on one of those two players, not a situation I like here. I think Tua will struggle. It's an in-division game. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of risk with both of those guys. I think that the ceiling is lower than we'd like it to be for Will Fuller. He hasn't been in his most productive outings, which were all last season pretty much. He was doing great fantasy production on a short amount of catches because he was being so explosive in winning routes downfield, making contested catches 20, 30, 40 yards downfield. That's not Tua's game. We saw this last week with Jalen Waddle, who's a very, very good player. He was catching passes at the line of scrimmage and running after the catch to get his production. Will Fuller is a little bit more of an immediate deep threat who's just going to run a fade and run straight past your corner. So not a situation I think matches up very well against the opponent this week. We'll see what happens. I'm really interested to see how Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller kind of try and from a dualistic perspective attack this offense and have their work share divvied up. We'll talk about that next week. We'll break down how I think that Dolphins pass catching situation looks the rest of the year after seeing this for 1 week here. But in a feel it out week against a tough defense, this isn't something I want to be a part of for this fantasy week. All right, so there's actually a little bit of confusion on my part there. I changed up my note sheet and actually removed one name from today's episode list prior to recording, and I added one in, that being Corey Davis. So things were a little bit jumbled up and out of order, and I didn't realize that my last player up on the board there was, in fact, Will Fuller and DeVante Parker. So sorry about that, but today's video is now over. So those were my 5, but really like 7 or 8 must-sit wide receivers for this week, because obviously we included a couple of names with each of these situations. Basically, all the Jets pass catchers. You've got Marvin Jones and DJ Chark, and then on the other side of things, we've got DeVante Parker and Will Fuller. So a lot of players, a lot of situations and games I'm a bit skeptical of this week. Again, risk is the main thing here, and that's something that we're not going to always be able to control. But while we do have some say over it, let's try and avoid that as much as possible this season. So if you have questions about your lineups, your leagues, trades, whatever the case might be, make sure you're subscribed first of all, but then comment those down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you all as soon as possible. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you for taking the time to watch today's video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.